This video is for Excel Module 2 information. I have a worksheet open here and a couple things I'm going to cover. Mostly this module is functions. A couple things before we begin. Just because we're starting functions doesn't mean you never use formulas again. So formulas are when you multiply or divide or subtract or even have more extensive type calculations. You can have an addition and a multiplication and division in the same formula. But a function is a built-in formula in Excel. So Excel is going to kind of do the math for you, and you just need to learn how to build a function. Let Excel do the work. And if you can just do a few basic ones and learn to read them and what's involved in them, then you can do some more advanced ones. So I'm going to walk you through functions. But the other two items that are in this module are absolute cell references and also naming ranges. So I have a worksheet open just to share with you here. It's called functions. So I just have a bunch of different worksheets on this, so I don't have to keep opening and closing different files. So this first one here, I want to show you what an absolute cell reference is, and also just remind you again that just because we're starting functions doesn't mean that you always use them. We still do some basic math. I find that sometimes when people learn the sum function, which is the one that is used the most, they do it for everything, and that is not necessary. We are only going to use the sum function when we are adding cells, more than 2 cells that are in a row. But anyway, this is an invoice, and it looks like we are a catering company, so just become familiar with the worksheet you're working with. So in this case, I'm going to find the total. So I've sold this many, the quantity, and this is how much each costs. First, they're the empanadas. So they're $2.99. I sold 15. So pretty much always I'm going to just start at the top, and I'm going to write all of the formulas or functions one time, and then I'm going to use the fill handle, this little square here, and copy it down, and all of the formulas are going to update automatically. So I'm going to write a formula first. Always refer to the cells. So finding the total is just going to be a multiplication, the unit price times the quantity. I'll hit enter to execute it, and then grab that fill handle. I'm holding down the left arrow, or the left mouse button here, and dragging it down. This is B4 times C4. That's what I had put here. I can see it on my formula bar. But then when I click down one, I'm now one row below where I wrote it. It says B5 times C5. And then down another one, B6 times C6. I wrote it once, B4 times C4, the location, and then when I copy it down, all the formulas will change relative to the new location, and that's called a relative cell reference. It's really just the heart of Excel. So I just wrote a simple formula there, multiplication. Now tax is going to be, I notice up here I have a tax rate that's already written in the worksheet. So I always want to refer to cells. But what's going to happen, so I'm going to find the tax, I'm going to take the total and I'm going to multiply it by the tax. What's going to happen when I take the total and I multiply it by the tax and then I copy it down? The D4 is going to become D5. The F2 is going to become F3. Well, what's in F3? In F3, there's a word or a label. So there's got to be something. In this case, it's a little bit different. I'm not just copying down two references that are in the same row. I'm copying something from another cell, and in this case, I want it to keep going back to the tax rate. I want this D4 to turn into E4, or D5, excuse me. I want the D4 to be D5 and then D6 and D7, but the tax rate I want to keep going back to F2. So what I do here is I make it what's called an absolute cell reference. So the D4 I'm going to leave relative, and it will keep going D5, D6, when I copy it down. But the F2 I want to remain F2, so I make it an absolute cell reference. An absolute cell reference, what I did there was I hit the function 4 key. If you're on a PC, you can hit the F4 key, and it will add the dollar signs. If you want to type them out, to create an absolute cell reference is just a $ before the column, if you want the column to be absolute, and then a $ before the cell, the row. And so it'll be $F, $2, and that will keep, when I do copy it down, if I do, it will keep that an absolute cell reference F2. So here I'm going to put D4 times absolute F2. Again, I can just type $, or I can hit the F4 key. Using the fill handle, copying down, D4 times F2, D5 times F2, D6 times F2. It will, sometimes you just need it to stay there. And like the tax rate is a good example. It's called an absolute cell reference. If the cell is copied, the formula is copied, it will always keep referring to that same cell. Absolute cell reference. Relative cell reference, the item changes relative to the new position. Here's the second one. I'm going to take, this looks like we're doing some, giving maybe a bid or something. We did some work, or we're going to do some work. So I'm going to take my hourly hours that I worked, and I'm going to multiply it by my hourly rate. Well, the hourly rate is in one cell. I want to keep multiplying it by that. So I'm going to make that absolute cell reference. So B4 times $E, $4, which is an absolute cell reference. And I can just copy it down. I'll probably change some of the formatting there, maybe get rid of some of these lines, but you'll see B4 times E4, B5 times E4, B6 times E4, B7 times E4. The hours are just going to the rate. And here's a good example of why we always refer to the cells. Let's say we're making $50 an hour. Let's say we got a raise, or we're charging an increase, $60 an hour. I just changed the 50 to 60, and you see that all the totals automatically updated. So absolute cell reference. Let's learn a function. So what a function is a built-in formula. Excel is going to do the work for you. The most popular one is the sum function, and that's because we are constantly, no matter what we're doing in Excel, we are adding up items. We're adding up our income. We're adding up our expenses. You can add up in this worksheet here. This is just maybe a personal, it could be personal or professional, a little budget of your utilities. So we have our electric, gas, and water bills, and then we have the months January through December. So this could be, we're projecting next year, it could be last year, it could be actual numbers, or it could be a projection or estimate. So I want to add up in January, how much did all of my utilities cost? So I want to add electric, gas, and water. If you ever have more than two cells that you're adding next to each other, you need to use the sum function, because that's the point of Excel, is learning how to use its features. If I'm just adding two numbers, I can just add those two cells. Because it's more than two, I want you to always use the sum function. So a few things about functions. We need to put a range normally in the parentheses. A function is always pretty much going to be, well, it's going to be an equal sign and then the name of the function. I'm just going to write this one out, and in a minute I'll show you all the different ways that you can insert them or write them. So equals sum, I can write it in lowercase. It will change it, Excel will automatically change it to uppercase. And then most of the, like all the first ones that we learned, there's 5 or 6 of them, they're all just going to be a word and then in parentheses a range. Well, a range is going to be something like this, what you're adding in this case. So I'm adding the range B5 through D5. That's how you would say that. Now I selected it and it automatically comes in. I could also type it, B5 through, which is the colon, and D5. So that's how you say it, but that's a range, B5 through D5. And then right parenthesis. A function is written, the function name, and then there's arguments in the parentheses. The first 5 or 6, as I mentioned, we're just going to put a range in the parentheses. Later on in this module, we'll see a little bit more sophisticated ones, and we're going to put a couple different arguments. I'm never going to put any spaces in any of my functions, just like in my formulas, no spaces. And I can just press enter. This is asking it to add B5, C5, and D5. And I hit enter, and it's $196. I will then copy that down with the fill handle. Again, we usually just write everything one time, and then we can copy it down with that fill handle. The fill handle also works to the right, of course. You can go down, you can actually go up if you wanted to. Another way to look at the same data is, hey, we're looking at next year, what are we projecting to pay? Or maybe if we were looking at the past, we could find how much are we going to pay in electric for the whole year. So the same data, just a different way to look at it. This range here is all of the electric that we paid January through December. So that range is B5 through B15. For some reason, if I wanted to add all of them up, like what were all my utilities for the whole year, just to show you a large range, this range here is B5, so you take the first cell of the range, through D15, and that would be all the ones that I have selected there. So if I just want to find the sum of just my electric for the year, the total, I'm going to put equals sum, and then I can just select the range, or I could type it out. Possibly an easier way, you can always write it out. I usually write all of mine out. Right on our home tab though, make sure you have your active cell where you want it. I'm going to click on this icon here. It's the sum function icon. It's a sigma. And I just clicked on it, and look, automatically came up. What Excel did was it just grabbed, you see the marching ants around the range, the closest cells that have numbers in them or values in them. I have a word over here, and Excel knew that. Sometimes it will like select to the left if for some reason I had a number here, but usually this works really good. If for some reason it didn't grab what you wanted it to, you can just override it and reselect. So again, I'll just escape out of that. Be in your active cell and just click on the sum function icon. Boom, done. And that took a sum of all of these. And then I can just copy to the right. I could even do the total of the totals here. So last year we spent 2,000. So either write it out or use the sum function. That's just for the sum function. There are some more functions in here. If I click the down arrow, you see average, count, max, and min. We're going to do those next. And then I have a few that get a little bit more sophisticated. So that's one way. Again, I usually just write them out. Like literally equal SUM left parenthesis, I write them out myself. Using any of these to insert is also correct, and you may even find some more on the formulas tab. We have some more different types of functions you can even do there, but I usually just write them out. Notice also another thing I love about functions, and why I feel like if you just learn how to write them or kind of what they are, you don't really necessarily need to, not that I don't want you to understand, but as you learn and you get more sophisticated, if I start writing out a function, like the sum function, this screen tip automatically comes up and it gives me a definition. A sum adds all the numbers in a range. Well, maybe I don't know what dsum is. I've never used dsum. Well, I just type that in and I can see the definition. I don't even know what it is, but I can learn with just a screen tip. I didn't even have to do anything. Adds the numbers in the field of records in the database that matches the conditions you specify. So nothing I want to do right now, but even if I wanted to find an average, I just typed out equal average, returns the average of the arguments. So it's telling me, it's not always perfect. I don't feel like the definition always works. But it normally will help me. I've been in situations where I don't know what it means, and I literally just look up the definition. I don't even have to leave Excel. Here's a good example. I didn't finish the function. So I got an error, and this is good to see an error. You'll see number sign name is a common one. And anytime you see that, it's literally a number sign and then name and a question mark, or there'll be another word there with a number sign starting it. It just means there's an error. And my error is I didn't finish it. Excel's mad at me. It's like, hey, what is equal average? It doesn't mean anything to me just because I didn't finish it. Let me just do a couple more sum here. Here's another little worksheet, just a bunch of values. Maybe I'll format them just for good measure. So I go to where I want. I always label. These are already labeled. Always label. Don't just stick a formula or function somewhere. Nobody knows what it means. The word total is very common. We normally don't use the word sum, but whatever you want to kind of label that to show what it is. Again, I'm just always do the easiest way if you can. Click on the sum function and it's done. And then I will always use that fill handle. Over here, I could find the total of just the groceries. This is a little worksheet about sales in a grocery store and all the different departments. I can write it out, or I can just use that sum function. Notice I can see the marching ants. I can see that it selected the what I wanted it to select for me. Here's a great example of a cell filling with number signs, and that means panic. No, it doesn't mean panic. It means just widen. It's going to happen to you. Happens to me, and it still kind of alarms me, but it just means that the column now is not wide enough for the longest entry. Normally happens to me when I put like a dollar sign or a counting format or sometimes comma format, any kind of format that adds decimals. It just means the column isn't wide enough. Excel does not automatically widen the columns to fit the longest entry. So I just widened it. See that those number signs went away. We'll do one more sum here. I want to show you how to name ranges. And this is another thing, just because you learn it doesn't mean you always use it. I actually very rarely use naming ranges. We're going to use it in a VLOOKUP function later on. So I want you to know how to do it. This one's just kind of a good example. This is a bunch of, I guess we're a bakery and we have all these different kinds of cakes that we make. And if I find myself using a range over and over again, I could give that range a name. So let's say, and again, I'm not going to do this just on a regular worksheet by practice. It's only if I'm referring to it, usually in a different, usually not just for a sum function, but for some of the higher level functions, or maybe I keep referring to a range that's on a different worksheet, and I find it cumbersome to go back and forth. I can name a range. So I just selected the range. A good name for this range, you literally give it a word name. It can be more than one word, but it has to be letters and there can't be any spaces. There's a few rules. You can't have lots of different characters, but this range here represents the January sales of our bakery, I guess this is. So I've selected the range and I can give it the name January. And then, so right here, if you remember from the actual application, this here is different than we saw in Word. This is a little bit extra item that we have in Excel. This is called the name box. And normally we just see our active cell, and then this is the formula bar. In the name box is a really easy way to just type the name of a range, select the range, type the name, hit enter. And now this range, which is B2 through B18, now has the name January. So if I ever need to refer to that cell, those cells, that range, I can just use the word January. Let me just name February just to show you again. So I select the range, and then in this name box, I type February, hit enter. That's what solidifies it. You could abbreviate it, FEB. You don't have to capitalize it if you don't want, just no spaces. And no one's going to see that except you. And if you're sharing your worksheet, that's the easy way. I think you just see it right there. We didn't have to go into anything. But just so you know, there is, let me find it here. It's on the formulas tab. There is a whole name manager, and you can define names. I would, if someone gave me a worksheet, like maybe in a work situation, they were on vacation, and I was just, working on their worksheet, or if I've just joined the company or just started working on a project, I would go in here to see if there were any named ranges. So this is where you can see that there already have been some named ranges. It gets a little bit more advanced, but just so you know, there is a place you can edit, you can delete them, you can see them, the named ranges. But just for simplicity, I find it easy in a worksheet to I don't have to go anywhere. I just select the range and I have this great name box right here. I'll just name that one March. So it's just naming the range. I don't want to use it for all of my sum functions, but I just want to show you. If I just start typing March, here's the icon that's associated with it. It comes in blue. You can physically, visually see the blue. And so instead of D5 through D18 for this sum function, I had already named it March. But you cannot copy them. So that's why I don't want you to use them. I can't do this. It doesn't work. It just literally copies it. So I'm not gonna do it by practice. But I just typed January. I actually didn't capitalize it and it came up correctly. So just make sure you visually see it. So that's a naming of a range. So I just wanted to throw that in there. It's a good thing to learn. This could be a range also. This maybe we would call half sheet cake plain. It could be very long. If we kept referring, what you find yourself, you get a little bit more advanced in Excel, is you may be writing a formula or function and you may be referring to values on other worksheets, or maybe your worksheet is very large and you might, just find it hard to navigate around. You could name a range or you could name one cell. So naming ranges. And then sum was just the first function that we learned. Let me go back to this grocery tab here. The next function to learn, probably average. Sum, average, min, max, even median and mode are the same. They're all written the same, very common. If you just think about math, we always have numbers. In Excel, again, the income, the expenses, the sales, the salaries, all that. You want to know the highest, you want to know the lowest, you need to find the average. What's the average sale price maybe of our products? Well, no matter what the values are you're looking for, a couple common, let's just do them all at once. I'll just put some labels here. We kind of want to always find, or not always, but many times find the sum, of course, adding things, the average of the numbers, the lowest number, and the highest number. Think about maybe salaries, and you're maybe looking to hire some more, or you're just looking at your business. What's the average salary? It's just a good thing to know, or to look at sometimes. What's the lowest salary? It's just going to pull out in a range of numbers, of values, it's going to pull out the lowest one and return that. Or we could find the highest, and that would find the highest number in a range. So these are all functions, very common, all written like the sum function, very basic, a word, and then at one argument in the parentheses. In this case, just a range. So let's say I wanted to find the average for each of these departments. The average is written equal average, and then in parentheses, put the range. The range here, be careful not to grab the total. The total is not part of the months. This is the average from, let's say, last summer, July, August, and September, and of the sales. So equal average, B5 through B7. Our average grocery sales, and just kind of look at it. July was 187,000, August 133, September 139. 153 is the average. So what Excel did, you probably know how to find an average. You add up numbers. In this case, there were 3. And then you get the total, and then you divide it by 3, or however many there were. Excel does that for you. So what Excel did there was it added up those 3, and then it divided by 3. If we had added up 7 different months, and then Excel would automatically divide by 7. So we don't do anything else. We just write in equal average. And again, we use that fill handle. You really just type everything a lot of times just once. Lowest, finding the lowest number. What was the lowest number of value of the sales that we had last summer? It's going to be min is the lowest. That's the function that's built into Excel. Returns the smallest number, equal min. I'm going to put my left parenthesis. I could either type it or just select that range. 133,015. That would be the lowest of those 3. Now, normally I might have 12 or 1200. It would find it. I just have a small little data segment here. Highest is another function. It's called the max function, or maximum, and it's going to be written. Maybe I'll pull from the menu here to show you don't always have to write them out. I can go here, equal max Oops, it did not come. There we go. Now it came. Here's a good example. It grabbed the two numbers closest to where I was, and I actually don't want that. But the equal max came out. The marching ants are going around, so it's still in edit mode. I can just manually select what I want. The proper range for the highest value of the grocery sales in July, August, and September is going to be B5 through B7. So I just manually selected it, and then I hit enter. So again, make sure you're not including cells and ranges that don't belong, particularly when you start adding totals. I might want to bold this or make this stand out a little bit more. A really nice formatting is some lines, some borders here. In Excel, I like to use the top and double bottom. A lot of times that looks really nice. So functions are built-in formulas. So far we've learned sum, very common, average, finds the average, min finds the lowest, max finds the highest. You could do things like median. Median returns the median or the middle number. So you could just write out median. What's the other one? Mode. The one that is frequently repeated the most would be the mode. And I think that's it. Oh, a couple other. Now they're all not written the same. There are some date functions. Something like equal today and equal now are two really common functions. I'm going to write it off to the side here. Equal today returns the current date formatted as a date. It has actually no arguments. You don't need to memorize this, but it's just kind of a nice little thing to learn. Equal today. So this is the date that I'm recording this video. It just returned the actual date. Equal now, and that one has no arguments either. Just left parenthesis, right parenthesis, because we're still fulfilling the requirements of a function. It's equal sign and then a word that's, you know, the Excel program, and then parentheses. This is empty, no arguments. So just left parenthesis, right parenthesis. That's going to give the date and the time. So the two that I use quite frequently. So again, working with functions, but in a little different manner now. Something might be new. I mean, you probably understand the value of adding numbers, finding the lowest, finding the highest. Count and count A. These are very common. And I've just got a worksheet here. These are just our sales for the different types of products that we sold in January, February, March, and you can see the months at the top. So I have a range here just to show you. It's just the information's kind of big, so we'll see. I'm going to write equal. I want to show you count. Count is a function that will count the cells in a range that have a number in them. So if there's a word, it won't count it. If it's blank, it won't count it. And it's literally just count. You can count the number of employees that were absent, or maybe that were present, count the number of students for something, count the number of products. In this case, I'm going to count the number of products. I lost my function there. Equal count. I'm going to go backwards because my worksheet's scanning. Equal count. So in this range, this is the January numbers. I'm going to just hit the right parenthesis and hit enter. There's 12. So it looks like we have 17 products. I have like a label there, and then all these. There's 17 products. In January, we sold 12 different ones. So see, we didn't sell any of these 3-tier cakes. See how these are empty wedding cakes. 1 tier, we didn't sell any. The Blast Off White, we sold none. Anniversary Rose, we sold none. But these other ones, we sold 23 of these and 4 of this type, and Full Sheet Cake Chocolate, we sold 8. So this here was, I don't know, you would want to label it somehow. Number of products sold, something like that. You would label it. And this you can of course copy across if you need to. So in February we sold more, in March and April we sold less, in February, and then whatever this month is, July, and then I would continue across. If I had July, our sales went down, we only sold 11 different types of products. There's another one. Let's see if I have. I don't have an example. Another popular one is Count A, and it will show how many are not blank. So it will count numbers and value and labels. So if I had a word here, it would count a word. So if I had a number in a word, it would count anything with a number, a label, or a value. So a number or a word, not the blanks. And it's Count A. So I don't have a good example for that, but it's Count A. Counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty, meaning numbers or words. So count just counts numbers, cells with numbers in them, and Count A counts any that aren't blank. Let's go to if. If now is going to have more than one argument. It's going to have 3 arguments. The if statement, very common. We'll do if and then VLOOKUP, and I don't think I'll do VLOOKUP. We'll do if and we'll do payment. They both have 3 different arguments. So just to show you how they're written. So an if statement, I'm going to just write equal if here. What I have here is a list of students and grades. And I'm just going to use it. Let's just say if you have over a 60%, then you're going to pass. Maybe over 59, because then that won't include the 60 if I just do over 60. Or I can do greater than or equal to 60%. But anyway, I'm going to do if. So an if function will check whether a condition is met. It will return one value of true and another value of false. So there's going to be 3 different arguments, and watch as I build it, just if I start typing the if. Once I'm in the arguments, the other ones just needed a range. These will tell me, they don't always make sense, so I'm going to try to explain this one. The logical test, that's kind of what am I looking for, and then a comma, and then what do you want returned in the cell if what you're looking for is true, and then a comma, and what if it's false. So it's basically just looking for something. What are you looking for? Comma, the next argument, what if it's true? Comma, what if it's false? So this is what it's going to put in the cell, what Excel is going to put in the cell if it's true. And this is what Excel is going to put in the cell if it's false. We're literally going to type something. If we want to type a word, we just have to put it in parentheses, so that, or excuse me, in quotes. That's one of those rules. So if the grade is greater than 59, so the grade is in B2, is greater than 59%, that's what I'm looking for. Then, if it's true, I'm going to put the comma there to separate. Then I want the word pass. So right here is what I'm looking for. It's called a logical test. And it's literally just whatever you're looking for. So in this case, we're looking for if the grade is over 59%. So I'm going to use greater than. Then a comma. If the grade is over 59, I want Excel to say pass in that cell. If it's not, I'm going to just say comma. And I'm going to say fail. Or I could write try again. Or I could write better luck next time. You can write anything you want in those quotes, and that's what's going to show up if what you're looking for is false. I'm just going to hit enter. So the grade that we see for Kim is 15%. That's obviously not passing. So unfortunately, she failed. And the great news is, just like everything else, we can copy this down using our fill handle. So write it once, and then execute it by hitting the right arrow or the enter to get out of it, get back in it, grab that little square, click on your left mouse and drag down the fill handle. So 70, just kind of to double check and to prove to you that I did it right. 75 is pass, 90 is pass. Let's go down. 45 is fail, 40 is fail, 35, 60 is passing because I did over 59. And then you write it one time. So the if function, a little bit more complicated, but it's just what, and this is what I mean, but I have no idea what an if function is or what it means. If I just start writing it, first I get a definition, and then Excel gives me this screen tip. And not always perfect, but they can at least help guide you. Let's do another one here. I just have another worksheet. Here's a, go to my, that one's a little complicated. Here's a worksheet, people that donated to a silent auction. So we have their name, and their city and state and what they donated. People donate like gift cards and football tickets and different things. The value of the item and the category of the item. So do we want to send a receipt? How about if the value is over $99, then we will send a receipt for tax reasons. But under that, like, so it was, I'd say over $99, or we could do greater than or equal to $100, however you want to do it. So we're going to look at the value here. And if it's true, yes, I want to send a receipt. And if it's under $100, no. This label here says send receipt. So I'm going to write equal if. How about if it's greater than or equal to 100? Greater than or equal to 100? Yes, send a receipt, or no. Literally whatever I write. This first one here, is this over 100? No, it isn't. So I'm not sending a receipt. Just going to copy that down using the fill handle. Just take a peek at some of these. No. $200 should be yes. $160 should be yes. So what are you looking for? I'm looking for, in this case, a value over 100 or equal to or greater than or equal to 100, comma, next argument, yes. If this is correct, then I want a word put into the cell, and if it's false, the third argument, what I want put in the cell. These do not have to be words. You could do more math, you could put a formula in, you could add 10% to it, to a commission or something. They can get really complicated, but just the foundation of the function is follow how it's written. It's the word, and then in parentheses are the arguments. And most of them have 3. Some of them just have the range. They're all a little bit different. As we get a little bit more advanced, they get a little bit more complicated. You can always look them up, or no reason to memorize any of these. But if you want to, you can always look them up, or just right in Excel. It gives you the screen tip. Last one is the payment function. Excuse me. I think the payment function is valuable to learn. Hopefully none of you ever have to take out a loan, but if you ever do, this will help you figure out what your monthly payment would be so you don't go overextend yourself. The payment function is going to give you pretty much, it's not going to be an exact number. We're not looking at extra payments or anything like that. But basically the payment, when you get a payment, you get a loan from a bank, you need to know how much you're borrowing, what the interest rate is, and what the length of the loan is. Those are the 3 items. So I just have a couple little items here. Here's the first one. It's like, let's say it's a car loan. And the nice thing is we're going to refer to cells. And if the payment's too high, then we can drop the price of the car, or we can drop the interest rate, or what if our interest rate was higher? We can kind of play with almost a what if scenario. So here, I'm just going to put it down here where it says monthly payment. So the payment function, it's actually equal PMT. It's not written out. What it says, calculates the payment for a loan based on constant payments and constant interest. So we're not talking about fluctuating interest or anything like that. But it's a good thing to look at. I'm looking to get a new car, or a used car. Can I afford $15,000? Can I afford $10,000? If I only have a certain, say I only have $200 a month, what can I afford? So I wrote PMT equal PMT, and this one has 3 arguments like the previous if statement. And you'll see here, this gives us a lot of different choices, but anything that the ones with square brackets are optional, or we don't need them for this one. So we need the rate, and then the number of periods, and then PV, which stands for present value. Basically, that's what you're borrowing. So the rate is, so the first argument is the rate, but that rate is an annual rate. So I clicked on B5 because that's where I put the interest rate. But then I need to divide it by 12 because there's 12 months in a year. This one's a little weird. You have to kind of add a lot to it. But the basic foundation of 3 different things in between commas is what's important. So first the interest rate, and then you divide it by 12. That's the first one. It says right there, comma. The next one's the number of periods. Well, I'd like you to refer, if it's written out in your worksheet, always refer to the cells. Number of periods is going to be the months. So in this, I did this on purpose. It says years, and the number of payments per year obviously is 12. So the number, it's going to be 60. If I had the months written somewhere, I could just refer to that. But because I always want to refer to the cells here, my second argument is going to actually be B6 times B7, which comes up to 60 in this case. But this will allow us to look at the number of years. Maybe we want to extend it to 6 years. We can bring it down to 4 years. But that's the second argument, how many months or the number of periods. The present value is how much the actual loan is going to be. So minus if you had a trade-in or you're putting any money down or any of that, how much are you borrowing? Now, because this is a payment, it's going to be a negative number. So it's just kind of a standard. We're going to put a minus sign. I'm literally just typed the minus sign, and then I'm going to put the borrowing amount or the present value. And that way, I'm going to have a minus and a minus. It's going to turn out to be a positive number in my worksheet. We, of course, will owe this amount of money if we took out this loan per month. But when you don't have, and I'll just show you what it looks like if I don't put that negative, then it actually is a payment and it's negative. And that's fine also, but it's just very common that we know that it's money that we're paying, so we put a negative there. So basically, this would be $552. Let's say I had $400 a month I was going to make my car payment. I cannot afford, because I wrote the function correctly, let's drop this to $20,000, the car. And there I could afford it, so to speak. That would be $368. Well, what if my interest rate was 7%? I can now kind of mess with these numbers a little bit. And anyway, if I could only do, $200 a month, I should be looking at a $40,000 car. I need to be looking at $10,000 cars. Or maybe my interest rate is very much lower. You could really see how that affects your monthly payment. So that's payment. Here's another one. This one actually does not have the months written out. So you always can be a little bit flexible. So I'm going to do equal PMT, just another one. This could be a personal loan or a car loan. It's going to be the rate, refer to the cell, divided by 12. The number of periods, this one's for 6 years, but we know we have to multiply it by 12. This didn't have 12 written anywhere. We know there's 12 months in a year, comma, and then negative amount borrowed or present value. So 3 arguments, and this one would be, let's say I want to change this to 5. And if I change it to 9, you can see the longer the loan, the more interest you'll pay, but the less your monthly payment is. And so you can kind of play with these numbers. So payment, just a different function. There's a lot. There's over 250 functions in Excel. I probably have never used more than 20, and I'm not in accounting. I'm not into accounting or anything that's high in numbers, but if you were doing a lot of math in the sciences or in some different businesses, Excel probably has functions that you'll be learning on your own at some point. That's pretty much a good summary of functions. I hope this helped. Remember, don't memorize everything. Just learn to go with it. If you just understand the foundation. Another thing you can do is just go back to some function here. You can go to more functions or go to the formulas bar and use, I'll just put in sum. You can use a function argument dialog box. I just think it gets too complicated. These are just pretty much a word and then a range, so I just type them out. But there's 3 different ways to do it. So here's another way. You can go in and type your range in there and then hit enter, or you can go to your worksheet, click that arrow, and it allows you to go in the worksheet and select, and then click the arrow to get back. And then I just think that's kind of complicated for something I could have done in 2 seconds, but if that helps you build it, you can do that. That's for the functions that have more than one argument. It's good to use that dialog box, but I hope this gave you a pretty good overview of functions.